Welcome to the next episode of the Austin Bar Association's Council of Firsts. I'm your host, Amanda Arriaga, First Latina Bar President. This podcast is made possible by the Texas Bar Foundation. In today's episode, we talk to true trailblazer, Sarah Eckhardt. Senator Eckhardt has spent her career in public service, specifically serving the people of Austin and Travis County. She's a graduate of New York University, the LBJ School of Public Affairs, and the University of Texas School of Law. She made history when she was elected as the first female Travis County judge in 2014. She now serves in the Texas State Senate and is the first female to represent District 14. She's a past recipient of the Travis County Women Lawyers Association Pathfinder Award, the Sierra Club Legislative Champion Award, and the Raise Your Hand Texas Public Education Champion Award, among many others. I'm so happy to have with me today Senator Sarah Eckhardt. Thank you so much for being here today.
I'm thrilled.
I want to start at the beginning because you didn't just become a lawyer. You had a very interesting backstory that includes the theater. So you started your education studying fine arts. You were at NYU. You were at the Atlantic Theater Company. How does that translate into going to law school?
Well, it translates really well, actually, because those who are in the performing arts are telling other people's stories. That's what you do. That's what your job is. And then as a lawyer, you're telling your client's story. And then as a public servant, you're telling your community's story. So all of the things that I studied in the performing arts have had high utility, actually, in my life as a lawyer and in my life as a public servant.
We have a lawyer musical at the Austin Bar, and I'm going to recruit you to be part of it.
Oh, I know you do have a lawyer musical. As a matter of fact, I have been in Bar and Grill.
You have?
I have.
We're bringing it back. I want you to come back. You probably won't have a lot of time, but you can have a cameo.
I
You
would
can be a
love
special
to
guest.
have a cameo.
I would love that. So you went to the theater, you went to law school, and then you immediately went into public service as an assistant county attorney. Did you always know you wanted to be in public service?
I did. Private practice was not my aim going through law school. My aim really was to go into policy work. And so I started out at the county attorney's office doing trial work because trials are a lot like theater. It's a lot like directing a play, not performing in a play, like directing one. So I went into trial work, had a wonderful time, learned a tremendous amount from amazing people. And then after doing that for about 8 years, it was an 8-year run of a very similar play over and over again. And it was time to start looking at a more policy-directed utilization. So I ran for county commissioner.
And then you ultimately become our county judge.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2014, it's historic that you're the first female county judge, which seems strange. But how was that celebrated, or was it recognized at the time?
It really wasn't. They just threw me into the deep end and said, get to work. And I was happy to do that. I'd been with the county. By the time I became county judge, I'd been with the county for, I believe, about 14 or 15 years. So it was not easy to, not hard, I should say, to know what the agenda was and where all the bodies were buried and what levers to pull and who to call. So it was a rare pleasure being county judge.
Well, and not every lawyer understands that policy work is just as important as traditional legal, judicial work. And so you took it a step further and you wanted to be our state senator, which we are very fortunate that is what you are. Why was that leap important for you?
Well, after spending so much time at the county and working very, very closely with surrounding counties, the city of Austin, our various other municipalities like Manor, Pflugerville, Elgin, Lakeway, Rollingwood, Sunset Valley, all the school districts, what became apparent to me over those years of working at the local governmental level is there was a very high degree of collaboration and very little partisanship. It was easy to identify what needed to get done, the various options to getting it done. We would argue over which option to take, but we really didn't argue much over what needed to happen. Our biggest impediment in those best practices was the state. So I chose to run for state government in the middle of a pandemic. And there are few times in my career where the impediment of the state was as raw and as deadly as during the pandemic.
In your first session, I saw that when you were sworn in, you and Lieutenant Governor are both wearing masks. So it must have been sort of a strange way to get acclimated to being in the state Senate. Was there anything specifically that surprised you about coming in and having your first session be the COVID session?
There were many things that surprised me, actually. I had an unusual campaign in the middle of COVID. It was entirely on a video camera and with a cell phone. So that was unusual. Going into the chamber, going into the building, wearing masks. A lot of the pomp and circumstance fell away, which was kind of nice, actually. But you also might recall that we went into session right after the January 6th insurrection. So not only were we wearing masks, there was also great concern about the possibility of violence. So it was a supercharged atmosphere at the beginning of that legislative session. And there was so much, it at least prepared me really well for how should I say it? It prepared me very well for the often um, uh, Alice through the looking glass feel of the Texas Senate, where often the Senate will act one way and do something else. So, because it was such a heightened, supercharged atmosphere, I became very acquainted very quickly with the uh, speaking out of one side of your mouth and doing something else. The bar was so low that anything after that, I'm like, oh yeah, that's just how things happen here.
But I think you always stayed very authentic because even though all of that was happening during the session, there were still a bunch of social issues. We're not a political podcast, but there are many social issues. And you never shied away from standing up and saying, I'm a freshman, but I have all of these thoughts. And you're probably not going to vote with me, but I have all these thoughts. And I want to say all these thoughts so that you understand what the opposition might be before you vote.
Well, sure, because if my job is to tell the story of my community, I don't have the luxury of waiting until I feel comfortable doing it. It's my job to stand up for my community and be a presence in that chamber from day one.
And you were, and you continue to be, and that is great. And you are one of a few females that are in the Senate. We now have Dean Zaffirini, which I am thrilled by. But you were the first female of our district. And that seems, again, strange because Austin sort of prides itself on we're very diverse and we like new people and new things. Did you think it's strange to keep being the first of these very important positions?
I do think it's strange. It's odd that it's taken us this long. I'm happy to be there now, and I'm happy to be thrown into the deep end to swim right away. But it is an odd feeling that there's still only, I believe, 8 female senators. And the number of women who have served in the Texas legislature over the history of the Texas legislature is very small. So I'm happy to be part of a cadre of women who are breaking that glass ceiling.
Well, we're happy to have you there because that means since you exist, there is room for the rest of us to come at some point. So thank you for doing that.
Well, those of us in the law practice we're all coming because we're at full parity now in law school, and we're not quite at full parity in the state bar, but we're getting there.
Well, and what I hope, and one reason I wanted you featured on this podcast is so many lawyers want to be judges, and that's the end all be all. And I keep trying to encourage people, please run for the legislature. Because if we want to change
God's ears, absolutely.
If we want to change the law, your job is where that happens. And so I need more people not running for your specific job, but running for the legislature, running for Congress, because that's also where we can make a difference.
Well, you're going to probably be surprised when I say this, but you should run for my job. I think that the contest is what makes us better at telling the story. So do run for my job too. And we're seeing fewer and fewer lawyers in the Texas legislature. And the effect of fewer lawyers in the Texas legislature is clear. We are getting facially unconstitutional pieces of policy passing both chambers and getting signed. And that is troubling because in my view, We should be governing. And if you're spending your time passing bills that are on their face unconstitutional, you're not really interested in governing. You're interested in making a statement, but not actually providing a benefit to the people of Texas.
So since we're talking about session, do you have any priorities that you already know for the upcoming 89th legislative session?
Oh, well, sure. We're concentrating on something I call opportunity infrastructure, which is pretty much anything that is our institutions are being attacked. Our institutions are being undermined from within the Texas legislature. And in my view, things like schools, hospitals, highway infrastructure, broadband infrastructure, courts, these are opportunity infrastructures that are absolutely necessary to a peaceful and prosperous society. So I'm very concentrated on that kind of opportunity infrastructure and to preserve those institutions that are a bulwark and are absolutely necessary, whether you are whether you're a bartender or waitress like I was through my 20s, or an artist like I was through my 20s, or a construction worker or a school teacher, or a lawyer or a judge, or, you need these infrastructures, these institutions for your community to thrive. So that's one thing. I'm also looking at criminal justice because all my background as a lawyer was in criminal justice. Also looking at emergency response and resilience, because having been a county judge or a commissioner through wildfires, floods, pandemics, active shooters, I have some firsthand, unfortunate, but still firsthand experience in what a community needs to do to be resilient in those moments.
Well, I know that sometimes what the legislature needs to hear is a lot of voices.
Mhm.
So we can put some information so that the audience can contact you in the event that you need support, letters, people testifying, um, testimony with interim charges, things like that. That way they can get involved as well.
That would be great.
Wonderful. So you've done a lot of things throughout your career. Do you have a couple of things you're most proud of that you want to talk about?
Oh, gosh. Sure. I have a terrible tendency to, after I'm done with something, I check it off the list and then I'm on to the next thing and I forget what came before. But thank you for giving me this question in advance, because I started thinking about it and I was thinking, we built a new civil and family courthouse against great odds, and it's beautiful and wonderful.
Mhm.
We pulled up a public defender's office. We had been struggling to get a public defender's office since the 1970s. 50 years later, we finally got a public defender's office up and running. So I was very proud of that. And I'm also very proud of our pandemic response. We built a very solid emergency operations team locally with the city, the county, the other municipalities, the surrounding counties. And because we had such a robust emergency operations protocol, we had half of the death rate from COVID that the rest of the state had. If the rest of the state had had the same protocols that we were able to um, bring about with our community, not through enforcement, not through requirement, but because we were unified in saying what you needed to do in order to stay safe. If we had done that statewide, it is reasonable to believe that 50,000 Texans' lives would have been saved. So I'm very proud of that and hoping to find ways that we can learn and improve upon our emergency response, because this won't be the last time that we need to come together as a community to keep ourselves safe.
It was an interesting time in Austin then, because nobody knew what to do, but there was some comfort that there were people at the city level saying, we're okay, use a mask, stay at home. But there were some things that were confusion just nationally and statewide of, do you need to Lysol your chips and all of your groceries?
Right.
But it was a nice thing that I do think that when you told the residents of Austin, stay put, it's going to be okay, I think that they listened and there wasn't a collective freak out.
I was having a very good conversation with Mayor Adler recently. I called Steve and said, hey, can we reminisce a little bit about that time? And one thing that we recalled was that when the governor started flip-flopping, At first, Governor Abbott was very strong on this issue and was right there with us, saying you need to mask and you need to maintain 6 feet social distance. And then he started to waver. Um, and when the governor started issuing orders that undermined our authority at the local level, the miraculous thing about that was that our community, almost in a patriotic act, chose to do it anyway, even though they weren't required to. We went on press conferences every single day with Dr. Escott and brought the community the latest information and a little bit of myth busting about what worked and what didn't, and were honest about mistakes that we had made. We thought that there was more surface transmission, and it turned out there wasn't. Um, and I think that the community responded in a really patriotic way, even though they weren't required to any longer. The governor wouldn't allow us. Um, it was it was a terrible time, but there was also real beauty in that time, how people came together.
What advice would you give to lawyers who want to follow in your footsteps?
To not follow in my footsteps. Not that I don't think that they should run for political office, but each person's life and trajectory is different. Um, they come to it for different reasons. And I suppose if I were to give a piece of advice, if you're thinking about running for public office, um, examine hard what it would be like to lose. Be willing to lose. And then you're more likely to make the right decision for your community. Because if you just want to win all the time, you'll start to compromise.
Yeah, I have often thought there are some people who are destined for greatness and some people are desperate for greatness.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
And you can tell the difference.
Well, and there's a difference in compromising to get something done and compromising to get to stay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's often very difficult to know the difference. It takes a great deal of honesty with yourself. If you're willing to lose, you'll compromise to get something done. If you're not willing to lose, you'll compromise to get to stay.
I'm so glad that you have been here today. Thank you so much. I know that the audience is going to love you as I do. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.